Okay, I think we'll make a start straight away. A little bit tight for time, and I do want to leave a little bit of time at the end, if it's possible, just for some questions and stuff, and there's a little bit of interaction in the middle as well. So, just to introduce myself, my name's Jonathan Reid. I'm pastor in Wexford Bible Church. So I'm married to Hazel and have 4 daughters. So I'm a man among women. It's great. No, it's wonderful. My eldest daughter, Roisin, she's 22 in UCD, but this year she's on Erasmus in France, studying there. And then second eldest, Avine, is 20, and she's also in UCD. Cara is just about to sit her Leaving Cert and wants to go to DCU. And then Saoirse's the baby, she's only 15, and she's second year. It's great to have this opportunity just to talk on this and to think it through. It was helpful in my preparation to be thinking through what does it mean? How do we keep our teens and our young people rooted and involved in church? As a church pastor and as a father of 4 daughters, I have to say, praise God, all 4 are walking with him as far as we can see. 2 of them have been involved with their Christian Union in UCD. Roisin was the president while she was there, and Avine was on committee. And the other 2 have been involved in church and with CEF and all sorts of other camps and things. So that's been a real blessing. But having said that, it is a constant issue, isn't it, in our churches? I'm sure you know, either in your church or in your own family. The challenge that it is, and how many don't make it through youth ministry and get rooted in the church beyond that. It's an issue that's as old as the conquest in Canaan. If you look back in Joshua, I know this is quite small writing, sorry about that. At the end of Joshua, he says, he's speaking to the Israelites, and he says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," yeah? And then the Israelites, they also say, "We too will serve our God." And Joshua says to them, "If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, he will turn and bring disaster on you and make an end of you after he has been good to you." But the people said to Joshua, "No, we will serve the Lord." Yeah. And later on in the chapter, we're told Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him and who had experienced everything the Lord had done for Israel. But then you fast forward another generation and into the book of Judges, and Judges chapter 2. After that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. How tragic, yeah? So the first generation were enthusiastic, we're going to take the land and we're going to serve God. And then the next generation were not there, yeah? And so it was a challenge for them as well. And I guess it's that perennial problem where maybe your teenage son or daughter comes to you and says, "I'm not interested in coming to church anymore." Or maybe it's a young adult that in your family or in your church who has gone away to university and maybe has been involved in church, maybe you've been involved in youth ministry up to that point. They head away to university and you're listening out. Are they getting involved in a church? Are they going to a Christian union? And maybe they are, maybe they aren't. And whenever it raises its head, or whenever that statement comes, or those questions, it's always the outworking of something that's been going on for a good deal longer. Yeah? It's the expression of stuff that's been going on for possibly for years. So the question is, how do we hold on to them? How do we keep them rooted? Well, I want to just preface everything that I'm going to say with a caveat, okay? And I want you to keep this in your minds as I'm talking, okay? I want to preface it by saying God is sovereign, okay? God is sovereign, and it's He who gives grace, okay? He's the one who gives new birth. He's the one who quickens and regenerates our children and us, yeah? So there's no formula. There's no follow this model and it'll work. Yeah. unfortunately. I've seen godly parents who have poured their life and ministry into their children to see their children walk away. And I've seen parents who are maybe not Christians or are not particularly good examples, and yet their children are walking with God. Yeah. And so we have to just stand back. At one stage, we have to stand back and say, God is sovereign, and it's him who gives grace. Yeah. As Jesus says to Nicodemus, the wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. Yeah. But having said that, it's not that we don't have a role, okay? And it's not that we don't have a responsibility. We do. And Paul talks about that in Corinthians. He says, I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. So it's like, you know, those twin tracks, if you like, God's sovereignty and our responsibility. And the two kind of run parallel into the distance. God is sovereign, and we believe that, and we have a role and we have a responsibility, and we believe that too. So there are means that he usually uses when he works in people's lives, in young people's lives, and he calls us to a particular way of living, to faithful parenting, to churches engaging with young people. But at the back of your mind, you've got to hold on to the fact always, it's still by grace. It's still grace. In the same way as, you know, he tells us to bring our requests to him, and he tells us that the means by which he grants our requests is prayer, isn't it? So he tells us to pray to him. But sometimes he gives us what we need without prayer. And sometimes when we pray, he doesn't give us those things, yeah? But he still tells us we're to come to him with our requests in prayer. And it's the same in this whole area of working with young people, working with children. There is the usual means by which he tells us to live and to operate, but it's still grace. So we can't take our hands off it and say, oh, it's all of God and it's all down to him, yeah? And neither can we say, it's all down to me. So we've got to, in a sense, take our role serious enough that we're going to engage and we're going to be faithful and we're going to do all that we can, but not so serious that we think it's all down to me and it paralyzes me and I could mess it up. Yeah. So I just want to say that as a preface before we go on, that's the assumption that's underlying everything that I'm saying, and that I think we need to operate on, that God is sovereign and it's his grace that's at work in the lives of those that we love, our children and ourselves. Yeah. I do want to talk primarily about kind of the role that the church plays, okay? Because we're talking about being rooted in church. But before I get to that, I do want to say a little bit about the role of parents and parenting, because it's important that church and parents are working in tandem. Yeah. That it's possible that parents might be working or operating in one direction and church in the other, and you're sending mixed messages, and parents or church can sabotage one or the other, depending on how they're operating. So it's important just to think, even though we're primarily thinking about church, the role of the parent as well. Okay. In the Old Testament, God comes to the Israelites in Deuteronomy, and this is what he says to them in Deuteronomy 6. He says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates." And what he's saying to the Israelites and saying to us as well is your faith and your walk with me is to be so integrated with the rest of your life that you talk about it when you're driving them to school. Maybe they're facing an exam and you pray with them on the way to the school. Or when you're around the meal table, again, you talk about it and you pray together. I mean, I remember with my eldest Roisin, so many meals that ended with a long discussion, maybe for another hour or hour and a half, where she would be raising questions. Yeah, but Dad, what about this and this? And Dad, explain this to me, and why do we believe this and so on. Fantastic opportunities, great interaction. But your faith has got to be integrated with the rest of your part and parcel. And as problems arise in their lives and as problems arise in your life, it's how you respond to that they're watching. Yeah. And so the role of parenting as a Christian is different to the role of parenting in the world. In the world, the role is, we've got to produce well-adjusted, well-behaved, successful children. Yeah. But as a Christian, primarily, I mean, obviously we'd like that as well. But as a Christian parent, our role is, and our priority is, to pass on our faith to our children. That's what we want to see as parents. We want to see them deeply rooted in Christ. That's our first priority as parents. So how do we do that as parents? Well, I mean, there's lots of things you could say about this. I just want to mention two practices. One is we've got to model the Christian life well to our children. We've got to model it well. I remember one pastor saying, where do we lose most children from our churches? And he said, it's over the dinner table after church. He said, that's where we lose most of our young people, which is quite a damning indictment, isn't it? And what he meant was when we come home, how we talk about other people in the church. And whether we run them down or whether we talk well of them. How we model that interaction. Our children notice. And children spot inconsistencies and children spot hypocrisy so easily. So how we model and how we talk about others after church and outside of church is vitally important. That's why I think it's important to talk about parents and that this is not sabotaging what's going on in church. Yeah. Your marriage as well, if you're married. How you speak or how you treat your spouse. Again, your children are watching. Now, it's not that you get everything right and that you present this perfect image. That's not necessarily what we're aiming for. What we're aiming for is that you're living honestly, that you're living with grace at the center and at the front and part and parcel of your relationships. That grace is seasoning everything. There's a book here. I'll mention some more resources as we go along. But this is a really helpful book, Gospel-Powered Parenting. Gospel-Powered Parenting. And he talks about having the gospel at the center of our parenting, at the center of our marriages, the center of our home. And he says, when we get it wrong, because it's not about being perfect in front of our kids, but when we get it wrong, it's modeling repentance. It's apologizing to our kids when we mess up. But if we don't apologize to them, then what we're actually modeling to them is that my behavior doesn't really matter. Yeah, even though I tell you to live a certain way and to repent and so on, when you do wrong, when I do wrong, it's a bit different. Yeah. So apologizing to our children is a big part of it. And, dads play a big role in this whole thing, and in the home and in modeling it. There's a role that the dad can play that is unique to the dads. I remember there was a youth weekend I was on with one of my daughters, and the leader at that, he was talking about an experience he had, and he was talking about the importance of dads. And he was saying, he was my age, but he was in a church talking about the work that he does. He works in counselling. And he was explaining it from the front, and he did a whole presentation. And afterwards, at the end, his parents were there. And his parents came up to him at the end, and his mum was like, you were brilliant, you were excellent. She gave him a hug, and she said, you were wonderful, and he said he was kind of like, yeah, okay. And he said, but my dad, he said, was just behind my mum, And my dad, he just kind of raised his head and he said, proud of you, son. Yeah. And he said, suddenly my heart just almost burst with pride. So he could hear it from his dad so much more easily than he could hear it from his mum. And God has given fathers that kind of role, to be the one who are able to convey that idea to their children. You have value, you have worth, you're good enough, you matter. Yeah. And so as fathers, we have that role with our children. And it's quite depressing, but some of the statistics that talk about children that remain rooted in church, again, the father has a huge role in that. They say that if the dad is involved and if the dad is bringing the children to church, whether or not the mum is involved, over 40% of those kids carry on and remain rooted in church. Whereas if it's only the mum and the dad is not there and the dad is not involved in church, it's only the mum bringing them to church, it's less than 10% of those kids that stay rooted and carry on, which is quite scary. Yeah. Now again, remember what I said at the beginning, God is sovereign, it's all of grace, okay? So bear that in mind with these. So we model the Christian life well. And then the other thing is, pursue your child's heart, yeah? We want them to love Jesus. That's our goal. We want them to be hungry to know him more. We want to pray with them. We want to encourage them to read the Bible. And it's their heart that we're after, not their behavior. Yeah. And so positively, that means investing in them and investing in all the things that will draw their hearts to Jesus. With my 4 daughters, every year I would bring one of them to the father and daughter weekend away. Scripture Union run a father and daughter weekend in Avoca Manor. And so they all, at least twice, they all had opportunity to come with me twice for that. And that was fantastic, to spend a whole weekend. And they loved it. I mean, they would still rave about it. Just having that special alone time with us, the two of us, was fantastic. And to spend a whole weekend and for them to be with their peers and me to be with other dads and then time together as well and teaching them. So all that is investing in them and wooing their hearts for Jesus, if you like. Sending them on camps with their peers, clubs, all the CEF stuff that goes on, sending them on them is positively inspiring them and pursuing their hearts. Negatively then, we've got to guard their hearts as well, yeah? And so we've got to convey certain things to them. We've got to convey to them the seriousness of being in church on a Sunday. That's one of the things we want to convey to them. And that can be a challenge as they're growing up. I remember many sleepovers that happen on Saturday night into Sunday morning. And it means being committed to going early in the morning to pick them up from wherever they are, to make sure they can be in church. And all the time what you're conveying to them is, this is serious. You need to be in church on a Sunday morning. And then as they get older, there's sport that happens on a Sunday morning. How do you navigate that, you know? And yet in some way you've got to convey to them the seriousness. They've got to be in church. Now, that doesn't mean they can't take part in the sport, but you've got to be able to kind of work it out with them. But underlying it all has got to be, this is a really serious thing and you've got to be here for this. Or there's the part-time job comes in then. Yeah? And how do you negotiate that with them? And tell them, you know, it's about being fair to them, but conveying the seriousness of where you want them to be. And then there's the whole area of boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. That's one area where, you know, as soon as possible, you've got to set the parameters for them. You don't go out with a non-Christian boyfriend or girlfriend. Yeah? Explain the rationale to them. If Jesus is going to be number one in your life, it's just not going to work. Over time, their priorities are going to be different from yours. and they're going to be at odds with you. And you explain it to them and you sit them down. You're after their heart. And often that's the first place or the first time where you see their hearts can drift when relationships become an issue. And you see them going one way instead of the other way. Or oftentimes it can be the first experience they have of testing, and where they actually need to make a decision and make a choice to say, is Jesus going to be number one or is he not? Because in so many other areas, in youth club and in church and so on, they're just going with the flow. And it's what they actually want to do anyway. But it's in areas like that where you're actually challenging their heart and you're saying, is Jesus number one? Can you make a choice that's going to be costly for you to put him number one? And so you're beginning to challenge them with that as early as possible to test their hearts. And also just to recognize in the whole area of parenting that there's a dynamic going on that is basically, you know, if you imagine a graph, okay, and the bottom line is a timeline and your child's age going up, okay? In the bottom here, you have your authority. Sorry, no, in the top is your authority, okay? And the younger they are, the more your authority is. And as time goes by, your authority goes down in their life. But at the same time, what should be happening is your influence should be growing, okay? So as they grow older, your authority goes down, but your influence goes up. So that when they're only, 8, 9, or 10, your authority is very strong, and you can say to them, no, you're going to church this Sunday. That's it, you're going. But when they're 16, 17, 18, it doesn't work when you lay down the law like that and you use your authority. You've got to get to the point where you're influencing them. And it's influence that wins them in those years. And where you see it get messy is where you see Christian parents laying down authority to their 18-year-old, and the 18-year-old just wants to rebel. So you're working on their heart, and you're seeking to win them in that way. Any comments, questions?
Would you just say between authority and influence? What's the difference?
Authority is where with the kid you're saying, I'm telling you to do it, and you're going to do it. Yeah. Whereas with influence, it's more like you're setting an example for them. You're calling them to live a particular way. You're trying to influence their heart. You're by your behavior and the things that things you're bringing them to, or opportunities you're offering them, that kind of thing. So it's less kind of authority where you're saying, you need to do this because I'm your parent, Yeah. Okay, let me just keep going for a moment, and hopefully have a bit of time. I want to talk now more about the role of the church, okay? There are different metaphors that the Bible uses when it comes to church, okay? And it's a fascinating the way the Bible does it. Instead of the Bible saying, here's our definition of church, and giving us a definition, it gives us different pictures and images. And they're overlapping ones, and they each add something more to our understanding and our picture of what church should be like. If you think of some of them, it talks about church as the bride of Christ. And that speaks about God's love for us. It speaks about God's faithfulness. It speaks about his provision, his protection of us, that kind of thing. It also speaks about the church as the temple of the Holy Spirit, which again is a slightly different picture or image, talks about holiness, talks about unity, that kind of thing. There are other images like the vine or the flock and so on. But two of the main images are the body and a family. Okay? Let's just think about this for a moment. The body. I want to read you where Paul talks about the church as a body. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 12. It was too long to put up there, but if you have it, you can turn to it. It's 1 Corinthians 12 and verse 12. And as I'm reading this, okay, I want you just to think, what words would come to mind as you think about the church as a body, okay? And I'll get you to shout out those words in a minute when I finish reading it, okay? He says, just as a body through, though one has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit, so as to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free. And we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many. Now, if the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts of the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. What words come to mind as you think about church as a body then? What would you say?
Many parts.
Many parts, so a diversity. Yeah. Okay. What else? Different ministries. Yeah. Yeah. So again, that's the diversity, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Interconnectedness. Yes. Yes. So he talks about each depending on the other or needing the other. Yeah.
Unity in purpose.
Unity in purpose. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a purpose he's talking about, but there's a unity there as well. Yeah. Some have called it unity and in diversity. Yeah. So that brings it together. Yeah. And just the value each part has for another part. Yeah. That's the body. In terms of a family then, he encourages us to think of church as a family as well. The Lord's Prayer begins, Our Father. In Romans, he talks about the Spirit that indwells us, and by that Spirit we cry, Abba, Father. Yeah. In John's Gospel, John 1, he talks about having the being born of God. He gave the right to become children of God. These are all verses that reinforce this image of the family. In Hebrews, he says, both the one who makes people holy and those who are holy, are made holy, are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters. Again, what words come to mind as you think of family? Yeah.
Just read the references because it's too small.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you. So Romans 8, verse 14 to 16. Yeah. And then John 1, 12 to 13. And then Hebrews 2, verse 11. Okay. Sorry about the size, yeah. So what words come to mind as you think of the church as family then? Love. Yeah. Yeah.
Interdependency.
Okay, interdependency, which is a bit of overlap with body, isn't it? Yeah. So interdependency. What else?
We have one Father out in those.
We have one Father, is it that what you said? Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So our common Father that we have, yeah. What else?
The headship.
Yes, okay. Again, a bit like the body. Yeah. So overlapping there again. Yeah. And there's other ideas in there, like the whole idea of belonging. Yeah. Family speaks of belonging, doesn't it? We belong in our families, like more so than we belong anywhere else, really. That's where we're from. So it's a place where we belong. It's also a place where we celebrate the things that happen to us as a family. Yeah. And there's a sense of community and a sense of togetherness as well. So these images, the body, a family, they're very important when it comes to thinking about what church should be like. And I want to suggest when it comes to thinking about teens and young adults and church, these are two vitally important metaphors, the body and a family. And only in as much as our teens think of themselves as belonging and as part of a body or a family, will they be rooted in that family or body. Okay? So only in as much as when they think of church, they think of family or they think of body, only in as much as they think that way will they remain rooted in that place. And that's the challenge. See, often the problem when it comes to youth ministry, often the problem can be that there's a kind of a temptation, and sometimes it comes from the parents, that they want to see something happening in the church to do with the youth, right? And they want a program. They want some sort of a program. And so your church, depending on the resources that you have, will put on some sort of all singing, all dancing youth ministry, okay? And will cater for as many ages as possible in that youth ministry. And it'll be fast and entertaining as possible, and they'll be with their peers, and it'll be fun. And the parents look at that and they say, that'll keep them. That'll keep them in church. Why wouldn't it? They're having a good time. They're learning something. Why wouldn't that keep them in church? But the problem is statistics show us that once the program ends and once they graduate from that program and they're too old for that program, they also leave church. Yeah? Now, I'm not saying that it's kind of either or. Either you have that kind of program or you do it a different way. I'm not saying you should go to the other extreme and have nothing for the kids or the youth of the ministry. It is important that they spend time with their peers and that there is some sort of program. That is good, and that is a good thing. But just to recognize the danger. There's a danger in kind of segregating our youth off. Segregating them off and then having the expectation that later on they'll integrate back into the church. And time again, what we see is they just don't. They enjoy the youth program and the fun and the activities and the peers and all that. And then they say, thank you very much in church. No, I'm not so interested in that. And so we've got to find a way of more than just the youth program. Not necessarily ditching that completely, but more than that. One writer that I found really helpful in all of this is a guy called Chap Clark, and he contributes to this book. It's one of these 5 views book, Youth Ministry in the 21st Century. Chap Clark is one of the guys who writes one of the chapters in it, and he calls his view the adoptive view of youth ministry, the adoptive view. And he takes seriously these metaphors for church, the body and a family. And he's the one who says, in as much as they feel like they belong to the body or to the family, they'll want to stay and integrate with it. Okay? And so he talks about church as a family of families. Let me give you a few quotes from what he says. To know and be known, to intimately participate in a family of families is so foreign that few graduates of even the best youth ministry programs know how or even why to seek it when they leave. The result is that youth ministry creates spiritual orphans where, when the lights are dimmed and the next class arrives, all that the students have to hold on to is a vague sense of personal responsibility. It's no surprise then that so many young people no longer align with the church after they graduate. He says they must be convinced when they leave home that their spiritual family, the family of God, is always there for them, regardless of where or how they live. Otherwise, as we maintain the ways we have been doing youth ministry for decades, some may flourish, but the majority are destined to hit that faith wall so many young adults describe. God, while very real in high school, becomes a distant, albeit warm memory from a bygone era. And then he talks about youth ministry as adoption. Okay, listen to what he says. This is how he puts it together. He says, the goal of youth ministry must shift away from segmenting young people off from everyone else to offering them a mutual, empowering, engaging, and supportive new family. We must rethink youth ministry so as to literally adopt them into the family of the church. Honour their gifts and calling, yes, celebrate practices and acts of justice and mercy and investment in others' lives and souls for the kingdom, certainly. But underneath and around all of these external effects and markers, we must commit to making sure every young person knows that they matter not only to God, but to a large and diverse family, because God and his church declare it so. To put it more clearly, the goal of youth ministry as adoption is for every child, every adolescent, and every young adult to be so embraced by the community of faith that they know they always have a home, a people, and a place where they can discover who they are and how they're able to contribute. In short, youth ministry is adopting young people into the family of God. I think that's really helpful. And it's helpful as a church pastor to be thinking about the youth ministry in that way. Yes, we have the programs, but ultimately what we're looking for is to foster an intergenerational community. Okay? And helping young people and teens and young adults to feel a part of that intergenerational community of all ages. So they get to see what it looks like for someone who's a believer in their 30s as they're grappling with small kids and how to manage that and how to follow God in that season. Or someone else that they know who's in their 40s and they're grappling with career and choices in that sense. They know other people in the church who are in their 50s and their 60s and are facing retirement and others in their 70s and 80s and struggling with old age. And so they see an intergenerational community, and they see each of these people trusting God in that season of life. And that prepares them, and they feel like they belong. And so this idea of adopting young people, it means allowing them to feel like they belong, being proactive to ensure that they feel an integral part of church. And it also means placing them in ministries where they're able to give and where they're able to exercise their gifts. And then when they graduate from whatever program you also are running, they're already a part of the church and they continue in the church. I want to just take a few minutes just to think, look at ways that we do that, okay? And I want to share particularly from our context in Wexford Bible Church, the church I'm pastoring, how we try to do this for the young people, for the young adults. Remember, what we're trying to say to them is, you belong, okay? And so we do that in many different ways. One is we celebrate community life together, okay? So the young people are involved and are included in all the gatherings that we have, in all the celebrations that we do. Often it's our weekend away, so we have a weekend away every year in the autumn time, and the whole church goes away for the weekend, and the young people are there, and oftentimes they will invite friends from other churches to come and be with them on that weekend, and so they have their peers there, but they're also interacting shoulder to shoulder with the older people in the church, with other adults and other families, and everyone is kind of integrated and enjoying one another's company. And so it's no longer just kind of a nuclear family here, a nuclear family here, and here. It's the family of the church. I often think of it, or think a beautiful picture of that is actually quite a surprising place in Scripture. If you think, in Luke chapter 2, where Jesus, as a 12-year-old boy, goes up to the temple with his parents, and he gets left behind, or he stays, yeah? And it says, that they were with relatives and friends, yeah? And it says they traveled on for a day before they realized that he wasn't there and he wasn't with them, And you kind of think, what a beautiful picture of community. And what a beautiful picture of celebrating that feast together as a community. So you think, where was Jesus eating his meals? It wasn't Mary and Joseph and Jesus in a family every time eating meals. Yeah, he was obviously eating meals with this family and that family and staying with this family that night and then another family, yeah? Because he was just part of the community. And that's how they missed him and that's how they lost him, yeah? But what a beautiful picture of that community. And that's kind of what we're aiming for as churches, to be that family of families. Most weeks in our church after the service, we'll end up singing happy birthday to someone. Yeah. And it might be one of the 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds, or it might be one of the 70-year-olds. Last Sunday we had a celebration for one of the women in our church who just turned 60. And again, all the church was there together celebrating, the young people and families. And then we have services through the year where we encourage them to kind of stay a part of the Sunday morning service. Okay, so normally in our church on a Sunday morning, normally at the sermon time, the small children will go out. So the babies, we have a creche. The preschoolers, every 2 weeks we have a preschool class. And then the kids in primary school, there's 2 classes for them, depending on their age. The secondary school kids, we get them to stay in for the sermon. And that was a deliberate choice that we made a number of years ago. Because rather than them going out at that stage and getting their own specific learning, they're beginning to get used to listening to the sermon. So I know it's a struggle for them at the beginning, but it's much easier for them to get used to listening to the sermon at that time when they're making the transition into secondary school and there's lots of things new, than expecting them to do that when they've just left secondary school and they're going out into the world. And then you're saying to them, oh, we finished our program, can you come in and sit for the sermon now? Yeah? So the secondary school kids are in for that time. And I think that's really important. But at different points of the year, we have all of them in. We still sometimes have a creche for the kids, just who are making too much noise. But everybody else, we kind of say, this is a family celebration. So Christmas morning or Easter Sunday morning, or when there's a baby being dedicated, or when there's a baptism, or maybe when there's just some sort of special service, we have them all in. And I address them all, and the sermon is for parents, adults, and kids as well. Also, it's about intentionally adopting a young person, okay? Clark, in his book, he quite helpfully describes how it might work. Listen to how he describes it might work. He says, when a small group leader, for example, discovers that a high school junior is a gifted audio technician, then that leader may use that knowledge to find a way to connect that junior to the group of people who are responsible for the worship sound production. The key to this strategy, however, is not to simply use the young person's skill or interest to connect them to a task. Rather, the tech team is tasked with adopting the teen as a member of the family of God. The junior thinks that he or she is there just to help on the audio mix, but the other adults realize that they are and are even trained to be literal adopters of that teenager. Spiritual practices, prayer, sharing, even Bible study then become a routine part of their work. And everyone welcomes the young person as if he or she were their little brother or sister or adopted child. Yeah? So it's about, where you see an interest in a kid and then you say, come get involved in this ministry. It's not specifically for young people, it's part of the whole church. And so you're integrating them, you're adopting them as part of that. He talks about a 5-to-1 ratio. Now, not 5, sort of 1 adult volunteer and 5 children, but 5 adults for every child. Okay, that he's saying basically every child or young person should be able to connect or have some sort of meaningful connection with 5 adults in the church. Okay, so that might be their Sunday school teacher, it might be their youth pastor, it might be a friend of the family, but they need to have at least 5 adults that they have a meaningful relationship with who are older than them as part of the church. That's what it means, adopting them. Or in other churches I've seen where older members of the church may take a really active initiative to pray for particular young people or children in the church and take them on as a prayer project. And it's just finding creative ways to integrate the youth with the other ages in the church. So, for example, last weekend, our young people had a dinner. It's called a progressive dinner. So these are young adults. There's about 10 or 15 of them. And what that means is they had the starter in one person's home, and then they moved and had the main course in somebody else's home, and then they moved and had the dessert in someone else's home. And in each home, they were able to spend time with the adults in that home. And the adults shared, the theme was kind of trusting God in difficult times. And they each shared kind of how that had impacted them. So you're looking for ways to intentionally adopt a young person. Also allowing the young people to be involved and to be included in the service or in the ministries of the church. On a Sunday morning in our church, we try and do that as much as possible. So often there'll be one of the young people will be involved in the welcome at the door. My daughter, who's 15, she runs the projector. And we've had a series of kids run the projector. They graduate and they pass it on to the next one. And so there's always been a kid on that. In the middle of the service, a kid will hand out the newsletters to anybody who's late, who's missed them. 2 of the kids go around with the collection bag and follow it. After we have communion, all the kids gather up the communion cups and bring them up to the front. There are kids involved with the music, playing the instruments. And when the kids, a lot of them, when they reach 18, they're then able to help with the creche or be volunteers in the Sunday school. So you're trying to find ways to get them involved. I've started going into the Sunday school. When I'm not preaching, occasionally, I'll go in and teach the Sunday school class with the kids. Just so they don't think, oh, he's just for the adults. Yeah? And we get them up front, maybe when they're heading off to college, to talk about where they're going and prayer requests and that kind of thing. Or if they're on a mission team, they come up front and they share with the church. So you're finding ways to allow them to be involved, included. So once or twice a year, we'll have a children's service. And that'll be completely the children up front. 1 or 2 of the kids will share something they've learned from Sunday school in the introduction. At the communion time, they'll share something about their faith, something they've written out that their parent or Sunday school teacher has helped them to do. And they'll be involved in the musicians and every area of the service for that Sunday. And when they're old enough and able, we get them to preach. So I've had two guys, one who's now gone on to Bible college. When he was 18, he preached his first sermon. Another guy, when he was 20, preached his first sermon. So giving them opportunity to do that, or if not preach, then when they're 18 or 19, just to do an introduction, share something they've learned. So you're trying to give them space to express. And then finally, just fostering a sense of it's us and them on mission together. Okay? So oftentimes for the young people, they feel like they're recipients of ministry and everything is being done for them and to them. And we run programs for them. But to think in terms of them and us on mission together. So we'll have a kids camp in the summertime. And once they graduate, the kids camp is for primary school kids. But once they finish primary school and they're into secondary school, they become leaders and helpers on that. And they're involved in the planning and the execution of it and teaching the memory verse from the front or the songs or doing the actions or any and which way they can help. And many of them have done the CEF training, like the junior training weekend or week in Duro in Donegal. And then they'll help in the Duro camp or they'll help at the weekly Good News Club. And teach memory verses and all that kind of stuff. And so you're looking for ways to say it's you and us together on mission. It's not just I'm investing in you. Yeah? And in all of this, we're looking for ways to say to them, you belong. You have a home here. Yeah? And what's been really interesting to see is just when our young people have left the church and have maybe gone to college or gone for work to another city or whatever, many of them get involved with churches or Christian unions or so on. Not all of them, but many of them do. But what's interesting is when they're home visiting their family, almost without fail, they'll come to church, which has been beautiful to see. Even if they're not involved in church where they've gone, they'll come to church when they're home visiting their family. And the reason is because we're family. Because they want to be there, because they miss the people. And so that's the kind of dynamic that you're trying to create and see them adopt. I need to stop, but are there any questions or comments? Sorry.